The parking lot was half empty by the time I pulled in. Which should have been my first warning. My name is Miriam. I was 32 years old that November. And I had driven 40 minutes in the dark to drop off Thanksgiving gifts for a family that had already started celebrating without me. The text had arrived that morning. My mother's name across the top of the screen, her message below it, clipped and businesslike. Gathering cancelled. Money is tight. Don't make the trip. I responded with a simple understood. Then I spent 2 hours wrapping things anyway. Because I was that kind of person. Or I was, then. I put the bottles of wine, the handmade preserves, and the card I had written into the passenger seat. And I drove to the house where I grew up. But the house was lit from every window. I could see the silhouettes behind the curtains. The flicker of someone raising a glass. I walked up the porch steps quietly. The way you do when you're not sure what you're about to find. The front door was cracked an inch. Just enough for sound to carry. My mother's voice first, warm and theatrical. Then my sister Dana's laugh, high and satisfied. And then the words arrived like a diagnosis. So much easier without Miriam here, honestly. My mother's agreement came back immediately. Dry and fond. I had my hand on the door. When a grip closed around my elbow from behind. My husband Theo pulled me back into the shadow of the porch. His mouth close to my ear. Theo is a healthcare compliance attorney. Not given to impulse. And his voice was the voice he uses when the situation is genuinely serious. Not yet, he said. Let me show you what I found. She had driven 40 minutes in the dark with gifts in the passenger seat. And they were already celebrating without her. If you already feel this, hit the like button right now. Subscribe to the channel. Because this story is just getting started, and it ends somewhere they never saw coming. We sat in his car at the end of the block for 40 minutes. While Theo walked me through what he had been quietly assembling for the past 3 weeks. He had noticed inconsistencies in the financial reports from the 2 regional wellness clinics I had spent 5 years building. My parents, Gerald and Sandra, had been running day-to-day operations for 18 months. An arrangement that had felt, at the time, like trust. The revenue numbers had been declining. Without any corresponding drop in patient volume. Theo had cross-referenced the operational expense reports with the vendor payment logs. And found a constellation of irregularities. Maintenance contracts with companies that had no verifiable address. Recurring invoices from a biomedical supply vendor that appeared nowhere in our equipment records. Gerald had been the authorizing signature on all of it. The amounts, individually, were modest enough to escape casual review. In aggregate, over 18 months, they were not modest at all. I already knew, sitting in that dark car, where the money had gone. Dana had been drowning in debt for 2 years. Not quietly. Not privately. But with the particular recklessness of someone who has always believed a rescue is coming. She owed money to people who sent formal notices. And to people who did not. My parents had decided, apparently without consultation, that my clinics were the appropriate source of her rescue. They used her business. Her 5 years of work. To quietly pay off her sister's debts. And they canceled Thanksgiving so she wouldn't find out. Drop a comment below right now, what would you have done sitting in that car? Keep watching. Because what Miriam does next is not what you expect. The following morning, I sat at the kitchen table while Theo pulled every financial record from the clinic management system. Vendor payments. Payroll logs. Insurance reimbursements. Expense approvals. Going back 22 months. It took most of the day. By evening, the picture was complete and unambiguous. Gerald had created the fictitious vendors himself, using billing addresses that were vacant lots and post office boxes in neighboring counties. He had routed the payments through 3 separate accounts before the money landed reliably in a fund that paid Dana's creditors. Theo built the documentation file with the methodical calm of someone who has done this in a professional context many times. He printed everything. Organized it chronologically. Cross-referenced the amounts against Dana's known debts. When it was done, he put it in a locked case. And told me to wait. 3 days later, Sandra called. She told me she and Gerald needed to discuss a business matter. She used that phrase, business matter, as if we were colleagues. As if the last 18 months had been a professional arrangement, she was now prepared to renegotiate. We agreed to meet at a restaurant near the hospital district. I arrived first. I watched them come in together. Gerald's hand on Sandra's back. Both of them dressed carefully. Wearing the particular expression of people who have rehearsed what they plan to say. They ordered coffee. They didn't touch it. Gerald delivered the proposal. They had identified an opportunity, a private healthcare investment fund. A chance for all of us to build something meaningful together. He slid a folded paper across the table with a number written on it. The number matched, almost to the dollar, the most recent balance on Dana's largest outstanding debt. I looked at it for a moment. Then I looked at him. I asked very simply where the revenue from the past quarter had gone. I mentioned the Metafield biomedical invoices. I mentioned the Crestline maintenance contract. I watched Gerald's rehearsed calm disassemble in real time. I watched Sandra stop meeting my eyes. They tried several approaches in sequence. The economic climate. A systems error. A misunderstanding about authorization. When none of those held, Sandra raised her voice. Gerald followed. Within 4 minutes, they were telling me I was cold. That I had always been cold. That whatever I thought I had found it in bad faith. I picked up my bag and walked out. She had the evidence. She had the documentation. She had everything she needed. And she walked out without using any of it. Subscribe to the Vault Chronicles right now and press the bell icon, because what she does with that evidence 10 days later is something none of them saw coming. Don't go anywhere. That evening, Theo and I made the calls we had already planned. Our annual foundation dinner was 10 days away. A formal event at the hotel downtown. Attended by our clinical partners, our major donors, and our most senior staff. I called Sandra. I told her I had been too hasty at lunch. I told her I wanted to make things right. I invited all 3 of them to the dinner as guests of honor, and I told her that I would have a check prepared for them there. Her voice had changed completely by the end of the call. She was telling me I had always been generous. That she had always said so. The night of the dinner, Gerald, Sandra, and Dana arrived in clothes they could not afford. Moving through the room with the particular confidence of people who believe they have already won. Dana was laughing too loudly near the bar. Gerald was introducing himself to our clinical partners as an operational co-founder of the practice. I watched from across the room and felt nothing I would describe as anger. They walked into her event. In clothes they couldn't afford. Smiling at people whose money they had stolen to get there. If you are watching this and you already know what's about to happen, comment "I see it coming" below. And if you haven't subscribed yet, do it right now. Because this next part is why we built the Vault Chronicles. When I took the podium, I invited my family to come forward. They came up together. Smiling. I told the room that I wanted to share something that had shaped my understanding of what it means to build something. Then I nodded to Theo. And the display screen behind me came to life. The vendor records. The routing logs. The invoice trail. Organized and labeled with the care of someone who had spent years doing exactly this kind of work. The room went very quiet. Sandra put her hand over her mouth. Gerald demanded that the screen be turned off. Dana left first, without a word. Her face set in the expression of someone calculating what comes next. Gerald and Sandra followed through the side exit. And the room held its silence for another few seconds, before the sound of other conversations slowly resumed. She didn't scream. She didn't confront them at the door. She waited 10 days and let the evidence speak in front of every person that mattered. Smash that like button if that was the most satisfying thing you have watched all week. Subscribe to the channel, we post stories like this every single week. And keep watching, because the morning after is just as good. They came to the house the next morning before 7. I watched them on the security monitor. Gerald is at the door. Sandra behind him. Both of them are escalating steadily from knocking to pounding to something I can only describe as pleading dressed as rage. I had already called Theo's office. Within an hour, his associate had served them with a formal cease and desist. The civil complaint for financial fraud followed within the week. Dana called me from 3 different numbers over the following 10 days. I did not answer any of them. My oldest friend, Renata, came and sat with me through the worst of it. When the social media posts went up and the mutual relatives started sending messages full of incomplete information, she took my phone out of my hand, put it in the kitchen drawer, and made me eat something. That is the kind of friend worth having. The legal resolution took 4 months. My parents were removed from any operational role in the clinics. The funds that could be recovered were recovered. Dana's debts became, finally and properly, Dana's problem. I changed my number and sent a single brief message to the relevant family members explaining that I wished everyone well and would not be in contact. There is a small thing I did for myself in the spring. I put a deposit down on a studio apartment near the harbor. A place that belongs only to me. Where I go when I need to think, in rooms that carry no one else's history. It is unremarkable in every way. Except that it is entirely mine. And I find that unremarkable things, when they are entirely yours, begin to feel extraordinary. She built 2 clinics from the ground up. Her family used them as a personal bank account for 18 months. And on the night of the foundation dinner, she let the screen do the talking. If this story hit the way it was supposed to, subscribe to the channel right now. Hit the bell icon. Drop a comment below. Have you ever been someone's solution instead of their person? Tell us. We read every single one. And we will see you in the next vault.